Hi there. Doing a quick vegetable variety review of Cañoncito pepper. This is a pepper I got from Wild Garden Seed. And Wild Garden Seed received it from a farmer and seed saver named Loretta Sandoval from Dixon, New Mexico. And Cañoncito pepper is a Landrace chili pepper from that local farming community in Dixon, New Mexico. And if you watch my pepper trials video, I explain a little bit more how I was trialing a bunch of Landrace New Mexican peppers, with this being the one that I had the most of. And I'm very interested in this style of pepper for one very specific reason. They are they're a hot pepper that is used for drying down. So they're a drying pepper and a chili pepper, and they are extremely productive and early. So they begin ripening peppers very quickly as the plant matures, much more quickly than most capsicum annuum peppers will be able to start producing ripe peppers. So when you talk about a pepper being selected to be early, and like when you look in a seed catalog and it says this pepper is mature to ripe in like 70 days or whatever, they're always talking about from transplant. So in the catalogs, right? So the thing to think about with these peppers and how they've been selected is these have been being grown in these communities in New Mexico, Cañoncito in Dixon, and San Felipe or San Juan Chile at the San Juan Pueblo, and on. All of Chimayo in the town of Chimayo. All of these peppers have been selected for hundreds of years, basically, since the Spanish colonial period, by the local people. But when you think about it, they're not growing from transplants. Like, certainly they weren't back then. They were direct seeding, at the beginning of their growing season. So you're talking about a pepper that's been selected for years in specifically when we're talking Cañoncito, it's been selected for, well over 100, 200, maybe 300 years for being grown to maturity to produce ripe peppers that can then be dried down in like ristros or whatever, from direct seeding, right? And in Dixon is like at 6,000 feet in northern central New Mexico, so they don't have an incredibly long season. So the selection pressure for rapid growth and early maturity has been intense. So that's what's fascinating about these New Mexican Landrace peppers is, the way they grew them, and just their growing system automatically selects for earliness because they were direct seeding them in extremely northerly climates, for direct seeding peppers. Peppers are, domesticated from a perennial plant in, tropical, subtropical, Central America, and at least capsicum annuum. So like they're, the basal wild pepper that these are descended from, was a perennial, and wasn't in a particular hurry to start producing peppers, and so then these have been selected not only to have this big fruit, but to like mature red ripe fruit really quick. And so that's like the fascinating thing about these Cañoncitos. So and there's a lot of different Landrace peppers, but as far as I can tell, Cañoncito and this other one called Alcalde, which is from a town very close to Dixon, are like the northernmost two of the New Mexican Landrace pepper strains that I've been able to see seed available for. There may be more. I'm not an expert, but like Cañoncito just is a really fascinating little pepper. So I did not direct seed these. Obviously, I transplanted these. I'm accustomed to transplanting my peppers. I might at some point experiment with some direct seeding and seeing what happens, but I haven't gotten into that yet. And there's actually a lot online about these peppers, and I will put a link in the description to Loretta's discussion and other people's discussion of New Mexican Landrace peppers in general, and Cañoncito specifically. Okay, so there's my spiel, more or less, about sort of the history of these peppers. Now I'm gonna assess them for my growing area, and what I would say is I really like them. They have been very productive, but they have a number of features that I don't like, and I view them, instead of as like a complete, perfectly out-of-the-box variety, I view them as sort of like a framework upon which to breed a similar, better adapted pepper for this area, because there's a number of features about my climate that are quite different from, you know, northern New Mexico. It's much, much wetter here. And one of the big problems that I'm having with these peppers is rot. And this has been a horribly wet year. And you can kind of see the remains of rotten peppers here, just rotten seeds on under the peppers. And there are a lot of rotten peppers, and there's, you know, this sort of an ongoing problem, rotting from the stem, rotting at the stem, and then the peppers falling off, or the pepper themselves just rotting, you know, gross. So and one of the reasons that's particularly bad, I've been having rot in most of my peppers this season, but they're particularly bad in the Cañoncito, because if you look at the plants, they're basically lying flat on the ground practically. These are the floppiest pepper plants I've ever grown. So you can see they basically don't make any attempt for the most part, except for that one right there. And that one's still falling on the ground, but it's sending up a branch vertically. But you can see there's the roots, and here's the plant lying on its side. They're just floppy, you know, and so the peppers are laying on the ground, and they're getting attacked by, you know, they're laying in the water sometimes, and they're just getting attacked by slugs, and then they start rotting. So it's a problem. So these need to be crossed with something that's more upstanding, in my opinion. So I'd like to use these as sort of the mother variety and build a early season drying chili pepper that will reliably mature lots of red drying chili peppers for my farm. And I think Cañoncito and some of the other New Mexican Landrace peppers are really, really great in a lot of ways, but they aren't, obviously they're perfectly adapted for growing in New Mexico. And if you take them out of New Mexico, especially if you take them, you know, into a much more humid climate, then you've got to start adapting their genetics to your situation. Yeah, these peppers are super interesting. I think if you're in a northern situation and you have trouble getting hot peppers to mature out of doors, seriously consider these. Although, and if you just want to use them, I think you need to trellis them or use some kind of training system to hold them up off the ground. I think they're going to be a lot better off than just letting them flop. I don't like trellising peppers, especially field-grown peppers like this. I feel like they should stand up on their own. So I view this as a good starting point, but not a finished product for this farm. But I like plant breeding. If you're not into plant breeding, you know, this would be a perfectly good pepper, you know, if you had it up in a cage or on, you know, trained to a stick or something like that. And it's a nice compact, they're fairly compact plants. They don't get super large. They produce a lot of peppers. And I've picked a very large number of peppers. I've dried a bunch of these peppers, somewhere in the neighborhood of a gallon of chili peppers I've dried. I've got a bunch in the house that are already red ripe. I'm gonna do another harvest here. And yeah, all I'm doing with these is I'm drying them, and then I'm using them as a dried pepper in, you know, sort of simplified Mexican type cuisine. Okay, so I just picked some. Here's my hand for scale. You can see kind of the range of shapes and sizes. They don't get much bigger than this, so they're a fairly small chili pepper. They're fairly mild. They are not a super hot by any means. They are in the range of like a New Mex Big Jim or a regular Hatch chili. You know, they're hot but not terribly hot. Very much milder than a jalapeno. I think they've got a lot of potential. I'm really excited about them, but they need some work. They need to be upstanding and off the ground, and a little less rot prone. Okay, I hope this was interesting to some folks, and thank you very much for watching.